The wind off the harbour came in sharp that morning, the kind that cuts straight through a wool coat and doesn't apologize for it. The ceremony was already underway when the commotion started. Not a loud commotion, not the kind with shouting or breaking glass, but the quiet, electric kind that moves through a crowd like a current. People turned, people stared, and for a moment, nobody said anything at all. That was the moment everyone at the Beaumont Harbour K9 Memorial would remember for the rest of their lives. Nobody had noticed the young woman standing at the back of the plaza. She wasn't supposed to be there, or at least, that's what the two officers near the East Gate had assumed when they first spotted her. She was maybe 26, 27 at most, wearing a worn canvas jacket that was 2 sizes too large and mud-stained work boots that had no business being at a ceremony like this. Her dark hair was pulled back with a rubber band. She held no program, no flowers, no flag. She wasn't with any delegation. She wasn't in uniform. She was just standing there very still, watching the dogs. Senior Officer Dale, the taller of the two at the gate, had walked over to her first. He'd kept his voice professional, low enough not to disturb the proceedings. "Ma'am, this area is reserved for credentialed personnel and invited guests." "Do you have a badge?" The young woman looked at him. Her eyes were calm in a way that made him slightly uncomfortable, the way a person gets calm when they've been through worse things than a security question. "I was told I could come," she said. "Chief Harmon invited me." Dale looked at his partner. His partner shrugged. "Chief Harmon hasn't been with the department for 3 years, Dale said carefully. "He passed away." The woman's jaw tightened for just a second. Then it relaxed. "I know," she said. "He called me before he did." Neither officer knew what to do with that. They exchanged another glance. The ceremony was moving forward. Commander Aldis was at the podium now, reading the names of the 6 handlers and their dogs being honored today. The crowd was large, several hundred people, many in dress uniform. The September sun was doing its best, but the harbor wind was winning. They left the woman where she was. It didn't seem right to make a scene. She wasn't causing any trouble. She was just watching. Her name was Simone Vreeland, and she had driven 11 hours through the night to be there. 3 years earlier, Simone Vreeland had been living on her aunt's property in rural Garrett County, Maryland. 40 acres of scrub brush and second-growth forest that her aunt, a woman named Bet, had been letting go to seed for a decade. Simone had moved there after her second deployment ended, and her re-enlistment didn't. The army had thanked her for her service and handed her a discharge packet, and she'd driven east until she ran out of highway that felt far enough. Bet didn't ask questions. That was the main thing Simone needed at the time. She started working with dogs because she couldn't sleep. That sounds like a joke, but it wasn't. She'd always had a way with animals. Her commanding officer in Mosul had commented on it more than once, watching her calm a spooked dog near a checkpoint when 3 other soldiers couldn't. But back home, with no structure and no mission and too much silence, she started spending her nights in the barn with Betty's 2 old mutts, and then word got out the way word does in small counties, and people started showing up with dogs they didn't know what to do with. A deputy's shepherd that had been shot on duty and was too anxious to work again. A rescue Malinois that had failed out of a training program. A Belgian Tervuren that a breeder was going to put down because she bit anyone who tried to leash her. Simone took them all. She didn't have a method, exactly. She had patience, and she had a voice that didn't carry fear in it, and she understood, in a bone-deep way she couldn't fully explain, what it felt like to have been trained for something terrible, and then set loose in a world that had no idea what to do with you afterward. She called the property Vreeland Kennels, mostly because Bet made her put something on the gate for tax purposes, but word spread further than she expected. Within 18 months, she had 14 dogs and a waiting list, and a vet named Dr. Osi, a compact, serious woman who drove an hour each way and charged half her usual rate because, she said, someone has to. Then the break-in happened. It was a February night. cold enough that the ground was iron hard. Simone had been in the house when the dogs went quiet, not the settling down quiet of sleep, but the sudden held breath quiet that every animal trainer knows means something is wrong. She went to the window. There were headlights in the drive. By the time she got outside, 2 of the kennel runs were already open. She heard a truck engine somewhere in the tree line. She ran and she yelled, and she got there in time to see the taillights disappearing down the logging road with 4 of her dogs in the bed. 4 dogs gone. The county sheriff's report was thorough and ultimately useless. No plates recovered, no witnesses, no footage. She'd been meaning to install cameras for 2 months and hadn't gotten around to it. She filed with the state. She contacted every shelter and rescue organization within 300 miles. She posted on every forum she could find. She drove the back roads at night with a flashlight and a bag of kibble and a voice going hoarse. 2 weeks later, a livestock dealer in Pennsylvania called to say he'd found a Belgian Tervuren wandering a highway interchange with a zip tie around her neck that had been cut. The markings matched Simone's dog, a female she'd named Vesper, the one who'd failed out of the training program and bitten 3 people before Simone had convinced her. The world wasn't always about to hurt her. Vesper was emaciated, one of her ears had been torn. She still recognized Simone from 40 feet away. The other 3 dogs were never found. She kept working. There wasn't another option, really. You don't just stop because someone took something from you, or if you do, then they've taken everything. And Simone wasn't built to let that happen. But something had changed. She started documenting every dog that came through, every contact, every network she learned about. She started talking to other small-scale trainers who'd had animals stolen and discovered it wasn't rare. It was practically an industry, the theft and resale of trained working dogs, particularly breeds with the right pedigree and the right drives. A trained Malinois or Shepherd could be resold internationally for $15,000–$20,000 to private security contractors who didn't ask too many questions. She connected with a federal investigator named Reyes, a quiet, careful man who'd been working the edge of this network for 2 years, and started passing him information. It wasn't glamorous, it was mostly spreadsheets and phone records and a lot of waiting. But eventually, it worked. A seizure in Virginia. 11 dogs recovered from a warehouse outside Fredericksburg, being held in conditions that the investigative report, in its careful bureaucratic language, called incompatible with humane standards. The trafficking network had been operating across 4 states. 3 arrests were made. One of the recovered dogs was a male Belgian Tervuren with a notched ear and a microchip number that matched Simone's records. Not one of the 3 she'd lost, but somebody's. Somebody who had done what she had done, loved a dog, trained a dog, had that dog taken. Investigator Reyes called her the night of the seizure. "We got 11 out," he said. 17 more we're still tracking. Your work helped crack it open." Simone sat with that for a long time after she hung up. The connection to Chief Harmon came sideways, the way most things did. He'd heard about her through Reyes, apparently. Retired K-9 chief for the Beaumont Harbor Police Department, 22 years running the unit, 40-some dogs trained or overseen in that time. He was 71 and had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that winter, and he was the kind of man who, when handed a terminal prognosis, looked at his to-do list and started working through it faster. He called her on a Tuesday in March. He had a low voice, a Maine accent that thinned his vowels, and no interest in small talk. "I understand you've got away with dogs that've been through trauma," he said. "I try," Simone said. "I've got 6 animals I'm worried about. They're in active service, all with Beaumont Harbor currently. I trained 4 of them myself. The other 2 came up under me. I need to know that if something happens to me, someone outside the department is keeping an eye on the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" A pause. "Working dogs burn through handlers faster than handlers burn through working dogs. People retire, transfer, have breakdowns, move on. The dogs stay. And sometimes the bond between a dog and the person who shaped their early training is the most stable thing in their psychological makeup, even if that person is no longer around. I want someone who understands that. Simone understood it in her sleep. She started a correspondence with him, emails first, then calls. He sent her files on each dog, history, temperament reports, training logs, handler notes. She sent him video assessments of her own animals and her methodology. They argued respectfully about approach and agreed on fundamentals. He told her once, near the end, "I've spent 40 years teaching dogs not to be afraid. I should have spent more time on people." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said, "You're doing it now." He died in June. She kept the files. She kept her promise, which was more or less the same thing. The Beaumont Harbor K9 Memorial was held in September. It was an annual event. Simone's hadn't known about it until Chief Harmon had mentioned it in one of his last emails, and even then she hadn't been sure she would come. She wasn't part of the department. She had no official role. She was just a woman from Maryland who had traded notes with a dying man about the inner lives of working dogs. But she drove up anyway, 11 hours, arrived just before the ceremony began. She stood at the back of the plaza and watched the dogs. There were 6 of them in full ceremonial harness, seated at attention beside their current handlers in the front of the formation. She recognized them from the files Harmon had sent. The big male shepherd on the far left was Kodiak. No, wait. Kodiak was one of the names in the files she'd memorized, but this dog here, the one with the Roman nose and the deliberate way of holding his head, was the one Harmon had called his best work. His name in the files was Sable, a female, 6 years old. Harmon had written about her more than any of the others. She remembers everything, every voice, every hand. You don't forget a dog like her, and she doesn't forget you either. Simone was looking at Sable when Sable's head turned. It was subtle, just a fraction. The kind of movement that most people in the crowd would never have registered. The dog's nostrils widened. Her ears shifted, not the sharp, aggressive pivot of alert, but the softer, questioning tilt of recognition. The handler beside her, a young officer named Trent, according to the program Simone had picked up near the gate, noticed and gave a small correction. Sable resettled, looked forward again. But her tail, resting flat against the pavement, moved once, just once, a slow single sweep. The wind shifted. That's what people said afterward, trying to explain it. The wind shifted and brought something to the dogs that the people couldn't smell and couldn't name. And what happened next happened in the space of about 4 seconds. Sable was first. She rose from her sit, clean, decisive, no hesitation, and took 3 steps toward the back of the plaza before Trent even registered what was happening. Then Zara, the brindle female 2 positions down, was on her feet, then Breck, then the 2 younger males, Frost and August, simultaneously as though they'd received the same signal. Then the 6th dog, a Belgian Malinois named Serge, the newest to the unit and the one Harmon had been least certain about, rose last and followed the others in a line, 6 dogs, moving toward the back of the plaza, moving toward Simone Vreeland. The handlers reacted. Of course they did. They were professionals. But the leashes were going taut and slack in ways that made no tactical sense, because the dogs weren't pulling in aggression. They weren't braced for a threat. They were just moving with a purposefulness that read less like a breach of protocol and more like something being corrected, like something returning to where it was supposed to be. Commander Aldis had gone silent at the podium. The crowd had gone silent too. Simone stood very still. She wasn't afraid. She'd had 6 dogs move toward her at once before, in the kennels, and she knew the difference between that energy and this. This was something else entirely. This was the difference between a tide going out and a tide coming home. Sable reached her first. The dog pressed her whole face into Simone's stomach and stayed there. Not jumping, not frantic, just there, breathing, the way a dog does when it has finally put down something heavy that it's been carrying for a long time. Simone put her hand on Sable's head. The other 5 dogs settled around her in a loose cluster. some sitting, one lying down, Serge pressing his flank against her left leg with an insistence that nearly knocked her sideways. She steadied herself. She kept her hand on Sable's head. She was aware of the crowd, aware of the silence, aware of the fact that her face was doing things she couldn't control right now and probably shouldn't try to. She heard footsteps approaching, measured, official footsteps. Commander Aldis stopped a few feet away. He was a tall man, grey at the temples, with the kind of face that had learned to be very careful about showing what it felt. "You knew Chief Harmon," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, sir," Simone said. "He told you about these dogs. He told me everything about these dogs." Aldis looked at the 6 animals, at the way they had settled around this woman, as though she were the center of something they'd been orbiting without knowing it. He looked at his handlers, who were standing with their leashes slack in their hands, watching. "He never mentioned you to us," Aldis said. "He was private," Simone said, "about some things." Aldis was quiet for a moment. "Then, what's your background?" she told him. Briefly, deployment, the property in Maryland, the work she'd been doing for 3 years. She mentioned Vesper and the dogs she'd lost, and the trafficking network, and Investigator Reyes. She mentioned what Harmon had said about the psychological continuity of working dogs, about the bond between an animal and the person who shaped its earliest understanding of the world. Aldis listened to all of it. "These dogs," he said when she'd finished, "4 of them are coming up on retirement assessment in the next 18 months. Simone looked down at Sable, who had not moved. "I know," she said. "Harmon flagged it. He was worried about the transition. Retiring a K9 to a home environment after high-drive work can go wrong if the match isn't right. Do you have space?" She blinked. "Excuse me, at your facility in Maryland." Aldis glanced at the dogs again, then back at her. "Do you have space?" She drove home 2 days later. She'd stayed in a motel near the harbor, at Aldis's insistence, to meet individually with each handler and go through what she called the continuity assessments, with something sitting in her chest that she hadn't felt in a while. Not happiness exactly, though it was close, more like alignment, the sense of a thing falling into a place it was always supposed to occupy. She called Dr. Osei from the road. "I'm going to need to expand the south run," she said. A pause. "How many?" "Potentially 4, within 2 years, maybe more depending on how the department's timeline shakes out." Another pause. "Longer. Simone, I know. You drove 11 hours to a ceremony you weren't officially invited to." "I was invited, by Chief Harmon. Chief Harmon is dead. His invitation wasn't." Dr. Osei was quiet for a beat. Then she laughed. A short, real laugh that she didn't give out often. "Fine. I'll start pricing fencing." The question people ask when they hear this story is usually some version of, "How did the dogs know?" It's a reasonable question, and it also misses the point a little. Dogs don't experience the world the way people do. They don't categorize time the way people do. Don't separate the dead from the living the way people do. Don't draw a firm line between the one who trained me and the one who understood everything the one who trained me understood. What they work with is something older than any of that. Scent and tone, and the body's particular electricity when it is at rest in a way it recognizes. Chief Harmon had spent months talking to Simone Vreeland. On the phone, mostly, but long calls, detailed calls, calls in which he had described each dog, their quirks, their fears, their particular genius, the specific sound each one made when they were working well, and in which she had responded the way someone responds when they are genuinely interested and genuinely capable and genuinely willing to carry something heavy for someone who is running out of time to carry it himself. That knowledge had entered her, the way training enters a dog, not as a set of rules but as a way of moving through the world. The way she held her hands, the cadence of her voice when she spoke low and steady, the stillness she carried in her body that her Aunt Bet had once described, somewhat unfairly, as the stillness of someone who has been shot at and found it less interesting than most people assume. The dogs knew what they knew. And what they knew was, this is someone Harmon trusted. This is someone Harmon made ready. Sable retired to Vreeland Kennels 14 months later. She was the first. She spent 3 days investigating every corner of the property with a thoroughness that Dr. O.C. called frankly alarming in a retired animal, and then she chose a spot near the barn door where the afternoon sun came through at an angle, and that became her place. She was there most mornings when Simone came out, already awake, already watching the driveway, already waiting for whatever the day was going to bring. Frost came 3 months after Sable. August came the following spring. Zara never made it. A handler transfer and a redeployment intervened, and she retired to a family in coastal Georgia who sent Simone photos twice a year. Simone was glad. Zara had always been a family dog in a working dog's body. She'd written that in the assessment, and it turned out to be right. Breck and Serge were still active as of the last report. The trafficking investigation that Simone had helped open eventually resulted in the recovery of 31 dogs across 5 states. The 3 she had lost in February 3 years earlier were not among them. She had made peace with that, or was working on making peace with it, which is usually the best you can do. She expanded the South Run. She hired a part-time assistant named Vivian, a 23-year-old who had grown up on a horse farm and had the same quality of animal instinct that Simone had started to think of as either a gift or a burden, depending on the day. She kept Chief Harmon's files in a binder on the shelf above her desk. She didn't read them often anymore. She didn't need to. Most of what he'd written had made its way into her by now. Into the way she assessed a dog in distress, the way she spoke to handlers who were struggling, the way she thought about the long work of trust building, which is always longer than anyone wants it to be, and always worth exactly as long as it takes. She never stopped looking for the 3 dogs she had lost. On a clear evening in late October, with the first cold settling across the 40 acres and Sable sleeping against her leg, and the barn light making everything amber and quiet, she thought sometimes about what Harmon had said in their last real conversation. The 1-2 weeks before he died, when he'd called late and sounded tired in a way that meant more than tired. "I keep thinking I didn't finish what I started," he had said. "You started things other people can finish," she had said back. "That counts." A pause. Then, "You'll be there? At the memorial?" "Yes." "Good," he had said. And then, after a moment in a voice that had gone quiet, the way a fire goes quiet when it's burning right and clean, "They'll know you. I made sure of it." She hadn't understood exactly what he meant. She did now.